Welcome to Berlin. Welcome to Berlin Briefing. My name is Max Hofmann, and today we're going to talk about the Mannschaft, the men's German national football or soccer team, wherever you live. I think we're going to probably hear both terms today. The World Cup is kicking off hours away from us recording this episode of Berlin Briefing in the United States, in Mexico, and in Canada. And I think it's safe to say that in Berlin, a lot of politicians at least, are following very closely and probably also knocking on wood for the German national team, also for their own sake. And if you stick with us today, we're going to talk about, and you will learn something about, how political the Germans men's national soccer team is at the moment. Also, how past chancellors have sought to be close to that team and whether it has paid off for them or not. We hope to hear some anecdotes there as well. Why Germany's government really is in need of a mood booster at the moment and other things. And overall, the question, of course, can the Mannschaft save the German government? And to discuss this here today in the studio is our chief political editor, Michaela Küfner. Just for clarification in the beginning, are you a soccer fan?
From the quarterfinals of any international tournament upwards, yes.
That sounds like a totally sensible way of approaching it. And also, we have with us today in Bonn, Florian Bauer. He's an investigative journalist. He's an anchor, and he's an expert in politics and in sports. So he's exactly who we need today. Very welcome for today's discussion, Florian. And I would like to put the first question to you, okay? The tournament being also in the U.S. and Donald Trump being the U.S. president, would it be wise for the German national team, for the Mannschaft, to beat the U.S. if there was a direct comparison in a match?
I mean, there's always a chance for retaliation of the U.S. president, whatever it comes from. I would say probably there is a chance that there won't be any retaliation if Germany would actually play the U.S. Again, because they've just had a friendly against the US and won that game, and I haven't heard of any retaliation so far. But no, I think so far the German team would be doing okay if they win against the US.
Right. I mean, the larger question is here, how political is this tournament? This is a headline right here. I don't know. Can you see this? Yes, you can, right? This is obviously Donald Trump. And it says, in German, it says, Spielverderber. Michaela and I discussed how we should translate this, but the closest what we came is a party pooper or spoil sport. Can we avoid having a political tournament, Florian?
No, I don't think so. I think when we remember 4 years ago, we were talking about the World Cup in Qatar, and we said there will probably not be any tournament, maybe a FIFA World Cup, maybe an Olympic Games, which will be that politically discussed as that Qatar World Cup. And here we are 4 years later, and we're probably talking about a tournament which is much more political than the Qatar World Cup has been, because Qatar, we were mainly talking about human rights and social security issues, while like now we're really talking about a broad political scale of that World Cup, maybe coming down to Donald Trump's immigration laws, maybe travel bans, entry bans, but also, I mean, the kind of the ridiculous situation that, I mean, we're having three hosts: the United States of America, Mexico, and Canada, while like the situation between the U.S. and Mexico and the atmosphere between the U.S. and Canada is really as bad as it hasn't been for ages.
Michaela, do you hear anything here in the corridors of power in Berlin, whether politicians are trying to avoid, to step on Donald Trump's toes during the tournament? Any kind of indication where this is heading, or do they say, hey, this is sports, this is something different?
Well, to them, it's sports, but there's, of course, a realization that to Donald Trump, the line is, to say the very least, blurred. He received a specially created FIFA Peace Prize. We saw the first FIFA licensed referee from Somalia not being allowed to enter the country, and FIFA basically didn't stand up for him. So it's pretty clear that that line doesn't exist, that you can't separate out the two. And when you ask around the enthusiasm for MPs who actually quite like to, take one of those, that's one of the treats that you have a higher chance of probably being able to visit the national team in a stadium. That enthusiasm isn't there. At least nobody's volunteered that information that they want to go over, with the Chancellor, of course, having committed himself to wanting to be there if the German team makes it into the final.
And the German Chancellor already has made a very optimistic statement. Maybe we can have a listen.
I think the German team is in such good shape and has developed so well that it has strong chances of reaching the later stages, the semi-finals, and if everything goes really well, even the final.
I had him, I remember, I thought he had said we were going to win the World Cup, but he didn't go that far. He only said we can make it to the final. And we should cross over to Jonathan Harding, who is in Winston-Salem, which is in North Carolina. So he is with the German team. He's with our sports department, expert on the German team. Jonathan, hi. Very early where you are at the time of recording this, so thanks for getting up. Just to clarify, we need to talk about this just a little bit, right? Do you agree with the assessment of the German Chancellor?
Good morning. Absolutely not. I do not agree with that assessment. I think he's been well briefed. I think he's been briefed positively, optimistically, but I think it is far-reaching to suggest that they would make the semi-finals or the final.
When you go to the press conferences of the German team, do you get a sense that they're trying to avoid talking politics?
Oh, definitely. There was even Rudi Völler who spoke in the build-up to this tournament saying that there will not be anything like there was in Qatar. This team is desperate to avoid the same kind of incident that happened there, where they famously put their hands over their mouths in their team photo ahead of the opening game. There will be none of that this time. I think they felt their fingers got burnt, and they are very wary of becoming too political because they feel that might weaken their position in terms of support. I do not foresee anything happening with the team at this tournament. And if it does, it will be done by the people off the field. They're very keen to keep it out of the locker room. They're very keen to keep it off the pitch. They are consistently talking about wanting to focus just on playing football.
But can they really? I mean, so many high-ranking sports officials in the past have said that this team is always going to be political, but that they even have a responsibility, a societal responsibility. So as hard as they may try, can they really keep themselves out of political questions, Jonathan? Is that your sense?
My sense is that they've become very good at it, avoiding political
media training.
Debate. Yes, but even further than just that, I think that they are very keen to take a stance, particularly the players. I think there's a fear among the players of saying something wrong, saying something that could land them in hot water. I totally agree that this is probably the worst tournament to try and be apolitical, to try not to take a stance. But I really think that the incidents in Qatar have changed the way that this team approaches football tournaments, the way that the people in the powerful situations and rooms of the DFB, the German Football Association, have approached this strategically. I think they will do absolutely everything they can to make sure that a player is in no position to ever address anything political, which is, of course, a little bit frustrating when you look at the situation that's going on in the host countries. But I'm sure that Germany will not be the only nation whose players have those answers.
Understood. Frustrating because you would like to have some answers when you ask those questions at the press conference. Before I come back to you, Jonathan, Michaela, you have something to add, right?
Yeah, I just want to stress that, of course, the debate over how political a team should be is older than the Trump 2 presidency. And there was a sense in Qatar that having, this symbolic photograph of them having their mouths covered by their hands was a wise idea, particularly at the beginning of a tournament. I think it's fair to say that when you're on top of the world and you've actually won something, you probably have a lot more sway anyway. So it's a much broader and older debate than Trump, but clearly it is heightened by this sense of politicization that we're getting.
Okay. I'm going to go back to Jonathan, too. We're going to talk to Florian, obviously, a lot later, and Michaela as well. But Jonathan, this is his side job today because he has to cover the German national team later on. So I'm going to fire all the questions I have and then let him go. Jonathan, in your experience, are the players of the national team, comfortable with having politicians come to them, congratulate them, even coming to the locker room? What's your experience with that?
I think this team has long been used as a political pawn for political gain. I think that the players have enough people around them to make that situation comfortable should it get that far. But I honestly don't believe it will. As I mentioned earlier, I think that Friedrich Merz's opinion of the team's ability is very optimistic, and I don't foresee any German politicians having to enter any locker rooms because they will not reach a stage of the competition that requires political involvement.
Although we do have to mention you, Jonathan, we don't want to say you're biased, okay? But you do have a British background, right?
No, that's true. But I have been covering this team since 2014, so I feel like I'm in a good position to make an assessment of
Jonathan is one of our top experts. But because we just talked about politicians going to the locker room, we have that picture. I think we have that picture, right, of Angela Merkel 2014 going into the locker room. Sorry if you can't see it because you're just listening, because I can describe. Basically, you have, what do you have, like 15, 16, 17 soccer players, all in their 20s, basically. Some of them have their shirts off. And in the middle, you have Angela Merkel. It really is a picture for the ages. And at the time, I think it kind of felt genuine. Everybody felt happy and like that. Jonathan, I gather you do not anticipate anything like this happening this year.
No, I think you're right to say that that was a unique time. I think it was something that made sense at that time. I think the climate at the moment in Germany makes it slightly unlikely. Obviously, when the football team does well, there's an element of success or a feeling that we're all involved. I mean, if you only have to look at the Euros 2 years ago, Julian Nagelsmann spoke very much after their exit to Spain of this sense of getting Germany together, bringing people together, bringing back a community that hadn't existed. He definitely reestablished a connection between the fans and the team that had been lost in previous tournaments. So we kind of did have our summer fairy tale 2.0, if you like. But I think this tournament, 2 years later, given all the situations in the host countries, combined with the situations that Germany are facing at home, the challenges that the people in society are facing, I think it makes it a very different kind of environment. An atmosphere. I do not foresee, even if Metz would love to go into the locker room and take a photo with the players and say, look at what we've achieved. I think this team's success belongs to the fans and the players themselves, and is not something that can really be used politically, I think, this time.
Plus, he'd probably be the tallest in the room, unlike Angela Merkel back then. Jonathan, really appreciate you being with us. You have a long day ahead of you. That was very interesting. And we'll talk to you, as Deutsche Welle overall, of course, about the coverage on the German national team for the next 4 to 5, 6 weeks now? 5 weeks, right? 5 weeks.
Long time to go till July, but as I say, not for Germany.
Well, good luck to you, and thanks again. Question basically to both of you. First, Florian, Merkel, really a soccer fan, or just went there to kind of get the glory?
I think she managed to really come across as if she was that true soccer fan at the time. And not only that, I mean, she established personal roots, if you may, so with some of the players before the World Cup even. It was said that she exchanged messages with Lukas Podolski, with Schweinsteiger, even every now and then. And that obviously gave her that credibility, which then paid off when Germany obviously did well at the World Cup and when she flew in. And she has not only been to the final, but she's been to a couple of games. And that's also why that visit to the locker room wasn't that odd as it would probably look like now.
The locker room is not going to happen. I mean, Angela Merkel managed to pull something very unusual off. Not just did she walk into a men's locker room, but she actually got the German national team, which was a lot more successful back then than it is now, because now the players are saying they just want to catch up with the top world football again. Germany was pretty much the top, defining that back in the days of Angela Merkel. But the players themselves were starstruck that Angela Merkel would come and visit them. Mm. And I really struggle to picture that with Friedrich Merz. I don't think he would put himself into that position because it looks somewhat awkward. What I can tell you is, because I did check with his inner circle before the podcast today, is that he will actually publish a very public message of support to the German soccer football team for the tournament, wishing them well. It's all very public. Angela Merkel did both. She supported them publicly, but she also had video calls and, motivatory messages also going into a locker room beforehand. we will not see that with Friedrich Merz. Very unlikely, particularly since he said he will go and see them once they've made it pretty much into the final round, which nobody expects the Germans to do, but we still hope, hey?
In the past, you would have said never write off a German team. Anyway, Florian, from what you've seen, and this is a more general question now, right? A pretty serious question, actually. Do you think it actually works that politicians go to a successful Mannschaft and it helps them in a political way?
No, I think I really doubt that because of several points. I mean, one is, don't forget, what's the overall picture football always draws when it comes to political questions. Football always says that they're unpolitical. It's not their goal to be political at all. That's what you hear from FIFA, but you hear that from players, you hear that from coaches, you hear that from staff, like Rudi Völler, even the team manager of the German squad at the moment, who has been on the podium over the last couple of days and always said, yes, there might be issues politically in the US, but it's not our job to actually address them. So then please let me ask that question. So why would football then be political if the German chancellor comes along and wants to get that piece of fame for him and his politics? That doesn't really work off. Secondly, we've constantly seen players really being reluctant to talk about politics in general, not even addressing minor issues. I mean, no one will prevent Joshua Kimmich to go to the World Cup and play at the World Cup because he wouldn't get a visa from the US. So he could say whatever he wants, but he doesn't. He just doesn't. And that's obviously something where I think politicians need to learn that they can't use their maybe the German football squad or any other sport squad for their own purposes. So I think the public in general understands that, and that's also why I don't think that it works if any politician would use that squad right now at these particular World Cup. Not at all, neither.
But I mean, there are surveys that say that at least a successful a Mannschaft does brighten the mood, right, in the country, and that it gives it a sense of unity, and that in turn could help a government, right?
So there's a couple of studies at the moment which have looked at how that World Cup actually could affect the mood in Germany in general. Let me just look down because I've written that down. So there is one study of the very renowned university in Hohenheim near Stuttgart, which has just published a study where they say almost 40% of all people who have participated in that study see that World Cup now in the US as an instrumentalization of and by the hosts. So 1/4 of the people who've been participating said that they were in favor of a boycott of that World Cup. 1/4, that's a lot. And I haven't heard a lot of boycott discussions at the moment or over the course of the last couple of weeks or months. So 1/4, I think, is a tremendous high number. Another study of the very renowned German pollster Forsa for the German television stations RTL and NTV, it just came out, I think, yesterday, says that 71% of all Germans are not looking forward to that World Cup. So that is the kind of atmosphere we're looking at here, where I would say that the majority of Germans are not really in favor of that World Cup happening in the three countries, happening in such a size we've never seen before. 48 teams, 104 games, over 1,200 players involved over the course of almost 6 weeks. We've never seen any sort of dimensions like that, and that's something which a lot of people would rather detest and would rather prevent from. So bearing that in mind, that whole World Cup has a sort of attitude, I think, in the minds of the people already before the first ball was kicked. And that sort of atmosphere obviously plays a huge role in terms of political gain for whoever is looking to get that political game in Berlin.
So there's just a shade, I could probably a shade, over the World Cup at the moment. Is that what you're feeling when you, I don't know how much you talk about it in the backgrounds, but you're feeling this also in political Berlin?
Well, I mean, it's a very different World Cup because it is so politically charged and because Donald Trump will use it as a stage, as he uses everything he can get his hands on. I think what probably illustrates it most that in Germany, which is completely football crazy, the city of Berlin couldn't find anybody to actually set up a fan mile during the World Cup, which was always a given in the past.
To be fair, the times
exactly.
are pretty
the
bad
time
because
difference,
it's at night.
Yeah, but it continues. The time difference, of course, plays a huge role because it would have meant people showing up in the middle of the night. But then at the same time, those cafes that have been a bit reluctant to put out chairs and screens and everything, they're beginning to do it now because they're beginning to get the sense that, you know, Germans, when it comes down to it and once the tournament gets going, they just can't stay at home. So
especially if the German national team does well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Then there is still an opportunity to open a fan mile. It would be an ad hoc kind of thing. It could still happen. So it's early days, but it just feels completely different. Not just because of the time difference, but because it is so politically charged.
And if I may add something, I think Michaela, that's what you're just raising. That's a massive point. We are talking about a World Cup with that time delay from 6 to 9 hours. That means that all games are only starting in the evening, and most games are going to be played around midnight, later than midnight. So the majority of people will not watch these games of that World Cup in a live situation, and that makes a huge difference. I mean, I don't know if any of the two of you are actually NBA, NHL fans, but I am. So I'm actually following.
I am. Go New York Knicks. I don't know if anybody's watching.
All right. Good on that one at the moment. But like I'm following the NBA and the NHL, but I'm following it the next morning.
Yeah, Max follows it live. He looks destroyed when there's been a game on.
Unfortunately, it's not the games; it's how old I am. But okay.
All right. But what we're saying is basically, if you don't stay up, you don't see all of the happening in a live situation, and it does make a huge difference. And that's going to be with the same with that World Cup. We're not going to be, we're mainly not being in a live situation, being in a pub or being outside. So the public viewing, let's just look back at the 2006 situation in Germany. I know it was a totally different one, but also the 2010 situation in South Africa. That has been the almost same time zone. So, you were going out, it was good weather outside in Germany, and then you're sitting somewhere and there is a TV screen, there is the World Cup being played, and you don't care if it's the Ivory Coast playing, or if it's Curacao playing, or if it's Iran playing. You just see that World Cup on a constant basis over the course of 5 weeks. That's going to be totally different, because if you're out in the cafes in Germany at, let's say, 2100, there is not going to be a lot of games, if there are any at all. And that makes a difference.
It kind of was like that in Brazil too. You have the time difference; it's not as much. Anyway, we're getting very much into the details of the
We'll
sports.
We'll keep an eye on it. I think the jury's still out on that one. Right. Yeah.
We'll keep an eye on it, and we want to talk about the political connection a lot here. So there's something we need to agree on to take this podcast further. But I'm hearing agreement, and that's a part where one positive effect for politics could be that the mood brightens in the country. Because if the German national team succeeds, that traditionally, and I mean, you have studies that show this, it brightens the mood and maybe gives the people a sense of kind of unity, right? At least that's what it was like in the past. And now Florian has told us the stage is a bit different this time. You also have stressed that. But I think we all agree this German government, from its perspective, needs a mood booster. Latest polls, I think, showed us that only 24% of the German population, at least of those that were interviewed for that survey, think that the government is doing a fair job. Not a great job, but a fair job. So that is very, very low. You do agree that at the very least, Chancellor Merz's government could use a bit of a distraction, right, Michaela?
Max, that's a fact. The data has never been so bad. We just saw inflation double, just new figures coming out. We just saw the latest prediction actually come out this week from the German Institute for Economic Research that by autumn, Germany is expected to slip into a recession. And then we have those bad polling numbers. Confidence in the government is down, and Friedrich Merz's conservative CDU-CSU party is now behind the far-right Alternative for Germany in the polling. So if there was an election, potentially the far-right Alternative for Germany would come on top, although they still have no chance of actually coming into government because nobody wants to go into a coalition with them. So yes, anything could be used, is needed to somewhat boost the mood, but we're still a far away from getting this to kind of a good mood level, whatever happens, even if the Germans, actually, if they won the cup, I think that could probably swing.
Yeah, you can't ignore that. I mean, the Chancellor himself said something about that in an interview with our sister station, I will call it, ARD. And my colleague asked this question.
How much are you secretly hoping that this World Cup can create the vibe that we just can't seem to generate ourselves right now?
Well, the World Cup in the US is going to be very different from the one in 2000, or when was ours, 2006, the one we call the Sommermärchen. I'm now a bit sceptical as to whether having these host cities so scattered and far apart is a good idea. I mean, it's Canada, Mexico, and the US now. They'll be travelling right across the continent.
But what if the Germans do well?
That would definitely have a big positive impact on the mood in Germany.
So just to get everybody in the loop, when they talk about Sommermärchen, that is the German word for summer fairy tale. And everybody here in this country knows what they're referencing to. It's the World Cup in 2006, which took place here. Florian, what do you make of what the Chancellor had to say there?
Yeah, I mean, it's an obvious take. I mean, we've seen studies. There was one from a sociologist from the university in Gießen who identified the clear dimension of a good result of the German squad at a World Cup also been reflected then afterwards in more national pride. So being proud of Germany, and for us Germans, it's really something which a lot of Germans are not really used to use that wording other than in other countries where people use that much more. So I think that whole World Cup in 2006 had a huge dimensions on the kind of way how World Cups have been viewed and how Germany has been viewed from the outset. And that was something which was very, in a way, also a surprise for a lot of Germans, that the world looked onto Germany and onto the Germans during that World Cup in 2006 in a different way than at least Germans thought the world would look at us.
It didn't fulfill the German stereotypes.
That's probably one of the things. Yeah, it was good weather, first of all. It wasn't raining too much. The squad was doing well. It was a very, very friendly atmosphere. And I'm not saying that Germany is an unfriendly country, but that's probably how a lot of Germans thought their country would have been viewed beforehand. And that World Cup was in a way a tipping point. But we have to bear one thing in mind, and I know, Michaela, that's obviously a lot what you're seeing in Berlin, obviously, as well. But for me, as a political anchor now as well, I'm obviously touching on that a lot too. I think we're in a state where this government is so bad, not only at the polls, but also when you talk to people, you know, in the cafe, in the restaurant, or wherever, where that need for reforms is such a huge thing in public, at least publicized opinion, and I would say also in public opinion, that is kind of like the basis where people are looking at politically now. And I really doubt that a good World Cup, let's say Germany in a good World Cup, that would be Germany reaching at least a half final, I would say. And I really doubt that would change any course here.
Yeah, let me just go a bit further down that road. I mean, in 2006, for instance, the government then used this elated mood, and I was in Berlin then, it really was quite amazing, to then kind of push through a VAT increase. So it's well known that unpopular measures can more easily come through Parliament when nobody's really watching. But the reform package that Friedrich Merz's coalition with the Social Democrats intends to do here, I mean, they don't really agree on the details, but they all agree it has to be historic. That transcends anything that can be covered up by a World Cup match or even by a World Cup summer. And I just came from Parliament today where we saw a really bruising exchange or successive speeches really between Friedrich Merz, who's calling on people to basically not close their eyes to what is needed, and the far-right Alternative for Germany basically saying, look, you should leave your coalition. You're never going to get it done with the Social Democrats. And the Greens, also in opposition, rightly saying, look, you just promised too much. You promised an autumn of reforms. Now we have the next summer. You are too slow. This is not happening. And it's your fault, by the way. That's what the Greens were saying, that Germans perceive the very concept of reform now as meaning cuts for those who can least afford cuts to their personal budgets. And that is a situation that the German Chancellor finds himself in, pretty much stuck with his coalition partner, making tiny bits of progress. And the timing is interesting, though, because we do expect the mother of all reform packages, the expert group that's discussing this, to present this by the end of July. And that would be right in the midst of this World Cup. And this is going to be an interesting one because this can also still fall flat. So it's a very difficult time, and the more actually we're talking about this here, the more I think Mats just really badly needs the German team to go through until then, because we didn't talk about how bad it would be if the German team gets kicked out straight away.
I was going to go there later, but I'm sorry, you're not saying that they deliberately schedule, these reform, the presentation of the expert group and kind of starting. We don't know.
No, really, honestly, no. There were bigger things at play here, but the VAT back in 2006, I think that was pretty much deliberate. But this is too big to fiddle with the timing, and it was too complicated to get all parties on board into this timeline. But I just want to add a fun fact that we are in a period
on soccer, really.
Soccer, yes, political soccer, obviously, okay. Max, because the team of the German Parliament, which includes leading figures of the Social Democrats, including the German Environment Minister, are the current reigning champions in Europe of European parliamentary soccer teams. So we live in a rare period, where politicians are more successful at playing football than the German national team are.
And I thought you were going to say that where German politicians are more successful in soccer than German soccer players in politics.
That too.
That's probably also true. But you raise a fair point. Yes, Florian wants to say something badly.
Sorry, can I just throw one more point in? I think which is important. One thing is obviously how successful the German team is going to be at that World Cup in the US, Mexico, and Canada. But the other point is how far and how many of the issues which have been addressed before that World Cup, the political issues, the issues of less freedom of speech in the US, the issues of arresting people by ICE in the US, the Trump policies. How much is that going to be happening during the World Cup? So one thing is there is a lot of fan groups which have been banned from attending the World Cup, although their teams are participating in the World Cup. So I've looked that up. That's the Democratic Republic of Congo, that's Haiti, that's Senegal, that's Cote d'Ivoire, that's of course Iran. So a lot of their fans are not let into the US. I'm not talking about not being let into the stadiums. I'm talking about not being let into the US, into the country. The Iranian team, is now, yes, able to play at the World Cup. And Gianni Infantino, the FIFA president, held a long press conference yesterday where he cherished his own accomplishments and that Iran is now playing at that World Cup. But this Iranian team has to leave on their play day. They have to leave the U.S. over to Mexico again. So these are the little things that matter during that World Cup. And the question will remain: how many of these little details will come up during the World Cup to really tell us of how much the success of a German team then at the end really matter to German public opinion.
And the success of the German team, what actually Germans think about it, that's something we have to squeeze in at the end here. We got to wrap it up because I could talk about this all day. Florian, obviously, too. And Michaela, I think you're kind of warming up to it, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
You can do another one of these. Got a couple weeks to go.
Okay,
yeah.
Let's do that. Anyway, the German public, at least those who were asked, how far will the German national team go? And this is what they said. How far will Germany go? All respondents said, from all respondents, 4% said not past the group stage. That's what happened, by the way, for the last 2 World Cups. And I think what's interesting here is 22% said they will make it to the finals. Kind of like their chancellor. There is an alignment here. And I'm going to ask both of you now, how will the team perform? With a quick answer, if possible. How will the team perform in your view? And what kind of effect will it have for the German government, if any? Michaela, you go first.
The 8th finals.
Yeah?
But that's because I'm having a positive day today.
Okay.
And yes, it will make a difference, but it's going to be a drop in the ocean. It just, this government needs so much more.
And you, Flo?
I knew it from the beginning. Michaela is a real pro. She knows everything, and she's underestimating.
Maybe you guys should switch roles next time.
I would go with her. It's a round of 16, and no impact at all.
No impact at all. Well, thank you very much.
Well, Max?
What I think?
Yeah.
Well, listen, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I like historical comparisons. And if you remember, 1994, the German team was bad. 1998, the German team was bad. And then everybody thought they would be bad in 2002, and they made it to the finals. They lost against Brazil, but I say we're going to see something similar. They're better than their reputation. But I'm not a sports journalist. This is really just historical comparisons, and they often just don't work. Anyways, nice having you. Thank you very much, Florian. Thank you very much, Michaela. Thanks to you also for sticking with us until the end here. And if you can, subscribe to Berlin Briefing, and you can get more of this. Also leave a comment. We always want to hear what you have to say. And whoever you're supporting for the World Cup, I wish you the best of luck, and may the better team win. Thank you.